Video stores, where are they? I miss those places. Let's grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary stories that happened in the past. Nearly kidnapped at the video store? After talking to several people about similar experiences, I've come to realize that almost everyone has a close encounter, and unfortunately sometimes more with being abducted or otherwise traumatized. My story involves taking a trip to a local video store when I was a boy of about 6 years old. My mom and I parked out front, and she went inside to return some movies while I was left inside the car. Immediately, as she was going inside, an old beat-up station wagon pulled into the spot next to me. My window was down, and the person driving the car was staring at me and asked me to help them get their wheelchair out of the back of the car. The driver was wearing a solid green jacket like I'd seen in Vietnam vets wearing them on TV. He also had a straggly beard and generally looked to be in poor health. I was shaking my head no, but I was in a bit of a shock at the appearance of this person and the way they were looking at me. They became enraged and told me I was a selfish, worthless child who wouldn't even help a crippled person. Then they started pulling away. Just as they pulled away, my mom was coming back outside. She got inside the car and I told her that someone asked me to do that. She had an immediate look of dread on her face and then told me I was very good, very smart for telling them no. She looked around and asked me if they were still there, but they weren't. It's scary to imagine how such a seemingly innocent child being pressured by an adult may have drastically altered the course of my life. Reflecting on that moment, even as a child, I knew that person had intended to try to kidnap me if I had gotten out of the car at the video store. Video store creep. I've been reading the newest stories on here, and one in particular brought back a memory of what happened to me in 2005, so I thought I'd share. I was 19 or 20 years old, between first and second year at university, and found a summer job at a local video rent store. I missed those. It was open 8 a.m. to 1 a.m., so whoever was working afternoon shift had to close up. It was located in a calm downtown area, only a couple blocks away of the city center, and whenever I had to close, I always took a taxi home, so I never had a reason to worry about my safety. After the first month, I had already learned who the regulars were, and because I was friendly and chatty, I started feeling my element soon enough. I knew they were good clients, I knew who they were, and who were the ones who always tended to be late to return DVDs and try to evade the fine, etc, etc. There was, however, one client in particular who always gave me the creeps from the very first time I saw him. He was young, maybe in his early 30s, dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, and whenever he came to rent or return, he was always kind of hostile towards me, even in mundane exchanges. The sulky and rather sarcastic way he spoke to me gave me that vibe. I don't take it personally, but let's just say he wasn't my favorite customer. So imagine my surprise when one day I come to work and my colleagues tell me that one of our clients had asked about me, when I start work, etc. She was teasing that he must have liked me, and I can really think of who this client was because she didn't remember his name. So she leaves, I start my shift, and it was really busy that day, so I just quickly forgot all about it. But then in the evening, when it was less busy at around 8 p.m., guess who enters the video store? The Grump. At this point, I still haven't made the connection in my mind, and I groaned inwardly thinking, why always on my shifts? Then instead of going through the aisles to pick a movie, he heads straight for the counter where I am and starts asking me questions like what's my name, where and what I study, if I have a boyfriend, etc. And I try to be casual and polite, even though he is once again talking to me with that hostile vibe, which really does not make any sense to me. Then he starts going away mid-sentence, but suddenly turns back to me and declares that he will come pick me up tonight after my shift is over, and we will walk home together. I stand there completely puzzled and weirded out. Then I try to politely dismiss that offer by saying that I normally call a taxi, so no need, but he doesn't even hear me. He stubbornly says, "Tonight I will walk you home. I will be here by the time you close." Now after he left, I felt relieved and tried to laugh it off and think nothing much of it. The later it got, the more creeped out I started to feel. I was wondering, what if he really comes? What do I do then? I also decide to risk closing off earlier, so at 11:30 p.m., I have gradually started the processes of finishing the shift when suddenly I see a few guys passing by the store on the street, and I recognize an ex-classmate of mine. I quickly run outside and shout his name. He comes back. We greet each other with a hug, and I tell him all about the creep and that I was scared. My friend Theo says he's going with his friends for drinks, but he'll make sure to return around closing time and see me home. I exhale in relief because I no longer have to close early, and I get back inside, arranging DVDs in a much calmer state of mind. At around 12:30 a.m., I start washing the floor and thinking I might have overreacted by getting so worked up about this whole situation, and maybe that guy was just a harmless grump who wouldn't act on what he said he would. Then I heard the doorbell tingle, indicating someone has entered the store. I go to the counter and stop in my tracks because I see him, the guy, slowly approaching me with a determined stare. I start shaking all over. Look, outside the streets are empty, so I try to remain calm and not give any nervousness away in case I trigger him somehow. I continue finishing my shift when he asks me if I'm ready yet, and I once again repeat that I don't need to be walked home because I have other plans anyways. This seems to annoy him, and he asks what kind of plans, since I didn't mention anything before, and my facade slips a little bit. When I indictively explain that it's not any of his business, but I made those plans after he came last time, so I asked him if he doesn't intend to rent, to please leave, as I have to finish up and close. He does not even budge, just stubbornly stands there and says, "You have no plans. I'll walk you home when you finish." Now, at this point, my treacherous chin starts to tremble a bit because I am on the verge of tears. I feel angry, frustrated, and scared. I'm looking at the clock every few seconds and contemplate my options in case Theo forgets about me and doesn't fulfill his promise to return. It was 12:58 and I was still stalling, seriously wondering if the situation warranted a call to the police. Then I hear the doorbell ding again, and we both turn to see Theo walk inside. I've never been more glad and relieved to see him, so I put down what I'm holding and run to him. He slides a protective arm around my shoulder and asks if I am ready, then looks at the creepy guy in that non-verbal, defiant male way of saying, "You got a problem, bro?" Now this would be a good time to mention that Theo was a tall, bulky guy who did sports, so he was not someone you wanted to mess with. In comparison, the other guy was rather slim. The creep looks at us for a few seconds as if weighing his options, then resigns and leaves. But before he goes out the door, he turns to me with a vicious glare and says, "This isn't over." Theo starts for the door and the guy quickly left. Theo walked me home and warned me to speak to my manager and colleagues to warn them about him. The next day I told them everything, and I had to start taking only morning shifts for a while. A few weeks later, one of the colleagues said that the creepster appeared and asked about me again. Mind you, he asked when will I be working the evening shifts again. They told him I only do morning shifts now, and he seemed quite disappointed. He then started ranting, saying that I let him on, and then rejected him, and my colleague told him that she actually knows what happened, so it would be the best for him if he leaves me alone, unless he wants trouble with the police. That seemed to work, because since then, he never returned to the video store, at least not while I was working there. I don't know what his intentions were, but boy am I glad for Theo being in the right place at the right time, as who knows what would have happened if he was not. The time a raging customer stalked me in his truck. I at the time was a 21-year-old female. I lived in a larger small city in the Midwest. At the time I had no car, a bicycle, and hardly enough money for the public buses. I worked at a local video store. I worked full-time and only lived a little over a mile from my job. Since I was a female in a male-dominated field, I was often used to targeted abuse from men that thought they knew better than me. Many times I stood my ground and flaunted my knowledge in subjects that these men could not grasp. Because of my willingness to learn and my close proximity to work, I often worked all sorts of hours, mostly by myself. This time, I wasn't the person closing and had a coworker, Joey, 22-year-old male who came in for a part-time shift after he wrapped up classes at the local college. We had a close friendship, and we often stood up for each other and stood in when we were flustered or needed to go to a bathroom in the back to do something. Joey received a phone call for a rental and he wasn't sure if they could rent. He asked the younger female caller to stop by to take a look if it's what she wants. She had quickly agreed and said she would stop by around 5:30 p.m. This was a night I was supposed to get done at 6 and catch the bus at 6:12. It was a windy, drizzly, early fall night, and I remember this because I had my bike with, and it became my anchor that night. A little before 6 p.m., this frantic, terrified, bawling 19 to 20-something-year-old woman came into our tiny shop. I was at the counter, looking at the different price tags and just generally cleaning stuff up. I looked up at her confused and was willing to help. She looked me deep in the eyes, asking if Joey was there. At the time, he was pooping in her tiny bathroom in the back, so I had to step in and help any customer. I told her that he was currently busy, and that I was willing to help her. She quietly told me that her boyfriend, who was out in his red mini truck in the small parking lot, had gotten angry and smashed her phone when she tried to call her sister that afternoon. Then the honking commenced. There was this light drizzle outside, so our front glass door was covered in beaded drops and was slightly fogged over. I couldn't see who was honking out there. I told her what I could do to help. We were a video store. Could I call the police for her? The tears started to really roll down her cheeks, and I was freaking out at this point. She kept glancing behind her, and the honks would not stop. I shook with fear and rage at this point. I myself was in a domestic abuse situation at the time and knew what this girl was experiencing. I broke my lock stare at her and tried to pretend I was working on the computer looking for a movie for her. I was just happy that the honking stopped, but I was increasingly shooken up. My whole body vibrated with fear. At this point, Joey came out from the back. He asked me what the honking was from. We had a lot of elderly farmers, lazy, disabled customers that would honk their horns. He thought it was one of those situations, but with the looks on our faces, he knew something horrifying was happening. The young guy stopped pacing outside and began banging on our front door. Joey did bodybuilding during his free time and was a gentle, non-confronting, short but stocky Asian guy. I was a short, obese, kind lady that would respond either two ways, like a doormat or ready to stand my ground. I knew that I could not fight a customer, and neither could Joey. Not because of physical reasons. We would lose our job, actually. The young guy threw the door open, and the wind kept the door open. He had this manic, hateful look about him. A total predator he was. He was slim but muscular. He hurled insults at us, and I gave the girl a pitied look. He slammed the door back shut, and both Joey and I stood in absolute silence. He snapped out of it, ran to the front door, and locked it. I told Joey to call our manager from our store landline, and stood around while he did. I noticed that the guy had moved his truck directly in front of our door. He was watching us from his truck, watching us behind the counter as we were on the phone with our manager. I had to leave to get home. The last possible bus came at 6:42, and I couldn't pedal my way home in this weather and all the circumstances that had just occurred. I just needed to cross the busy highway and down the sidewalk by 1/8 of a mile to the nearest bus stop. Joey, the guy, and I played the waiting game. It was 6:23 when the dickhead finally left our parking lot. I told Joey that I would leave at 6:25 so I could arrive at the stop safely. Joey opened the front door and I threw myself on top of my bike and pedaled harder than I could ever imagine. Now, mind you, our store was in an industrial shopping area at the very edge of town. We worked next to a sub shop, and I worked across from a strip mall with a bullseye store and a local chain grocery store with other retail stores and a bank and all that large lot. It started to downpour as I tried to pull out of the parking lot straddling my bicycle. I caught a glimpse of the red truck looping around the sub shop. The highway had a dual lanes each way, and I had to play real-life Frogger if I wanted to make it to my destination in one piece. There were a few cars that slowed for me as I hauled ass to the other side of the road. I jumped off of my bike and threw it on top of the curb. I promptly hopped back on and tried to pedal off. My front wheel was stuck to the gassy strip, and my right foot had slipped off of the pedal. My shin struck the pedal, and I had to act quickly. I grabbed the frame of my bike and jogged awkwardly to the bus stop. The red truck pulled into the bank parking lot, of which I had just passed. The truck pulled around and went out through the entrance across from the sub shop and took the closest lane to mine. He went at a crawl and turned on the red light so he could circle the main parking lot of the shopping center. There was 3 ways to get into that parking lot, one to the left, one in the center, and the other far to the right next to the grocery store. I stuck to the sidewalks. It felt safer and it was in front of people. The truck patrolled the parking lot, the hunter stalking its prey. I felt cold felt sore concern like an injured animal. There were a couple cars that pulled into the left entrance of the parking lot, causing the truck to stop from re-entering the lot again. I almost collapsed in the shitty small bus stop and I felt my phone buzz. I saw that it was Red Joey, so I rested my bike on my person to answer the call. Joey told me he was watching, and even though he had an elderly couple in the store that he was helping out, that he wouldn't allow the guy to hurt me. I started to cry. All this had just gotten to me. The red truck looped around once again and again. I saw the bus pull up early at 6:39 and I could not be happier. I knew the driver since I used to bus to get around town, errand shopping, and to get to and go from work. I had a stupid friggin' bike to worry about. I hung up the phone with Joey, putting my phone in my jacket pocket and strapped down my bike in the rack that was in front of the bus. I struggled since I shook and my bike was slick from the rain. I got onto the bus, turned to open the bus doors, and saw the truck took a left at the center entrance of the lot. I could finally let my guard down. I sat at the front and my hands shook, trying to get the $125 for the fare. The driver said that it was okay, and I could take time with my change. I kept my backpack on, pulled my damn phone from my pocket, dialing Joey's number, letting him know I was fine. In under 15 minutes, I made it to my apartment safe, but deeply disturbed. Took my bike in, and I wouldn't draw any attention to where I lived. All this gave me an idea to leave my own domestic abuse situation a few months later when COVID took the world by storm. To this day, I wonder about that girl and hope that somebody more daring and stronger than me called the cops on her abuser. That she had the strength to leave that violent man for her to write her own story and to cover from all of it. I'm currently doing significantly better in life and finally have my own car, and I live a couple states safely away from my past life, even though I'm states away and it's been 3 years now. Let's not meet.